They tell this story wrong in the archives. I have read the official version. It is clean. It has dates and casualty figures and a neat little map with arrows. It does not have the smell of the ward at 3 in the morning. It does not have the sound a human woman makes when she sings to a child that is not hers, that is not even her species, in a language the child will never understand. So I will tell it my way. I was there. My name does not matter to you, but I will give it anyway, because I am old now and names are one of the few things I still own. Subwarden Ossick, 3rd rank of the V. Harnell Concord Enforcement Line. I carried a rifle onto a human world with orders to kill sleeping children, and I am telling you this so you will understand what it cost me to lower it. Let me start where it really started, not with the humans, with the silence. You have to understand how loud the galaxy used to be. I do not mean sound. I mean the young. Every port, every station, every crash ring on every settled world full of the small ones. The V. Harnell had our pups, all teeth and clumsy paws, chewing on anything that fit in their mouths. The Selith had their hatchlings that hummed when they were happy, so a nursery sounded like a hive of contented insects. The Drahel carried their larvae in throat pouches, and you could hear the little clicks all day, a soft chorus under everything. The Mayan young glowed faint blue when they dreamed. On a big station, you were never more than a few steps from something small and alive and needing you. I grew up in that noise. We all did. Nobody thinks about a background sound until it stops. It stopped on the 41st day of the cold season, not everywhere at once. That was the part that made it so hard to see. It started at the edge worlds, the quiet ones, the little farming moons nobody watches. A Drahel fisher on the Moonkess woke one morning and his throat pouch was empty. His 3 larvae gone, no opening in the pouch, no blood, just empty like they had never been there. He thought he was losing his mind. He went to his neighbor. The neighbor's crash tank was empty too, all the little clicks silent. By midday the whole settlement of Kess had realized that not one child under the age of growing remained on the moon. Doors still locked from the inside, windows unbroken, cribs still warm. The children were simply not there anymore. The report from Kess sat in a Concord office for 6 days before anyone read it seriously, because it read like madness, and madness is not a security threat. By the time someone read it, the silence had jumped to 11 other systems. I remember the morning it reached my station. V. Harnell Anchor 9, a big cold wheel turning slow around a dead sun, 30,000 souls. I was coming off shift. I stopped at the crash ring to look in on my sister's pup, a fat little thing named Atu who liked to bite my tail and had never once been afraid of anything. The crash ring was quiet. I want you to imagine walking into a place that has always, in your entire life, been full of small living noise, and it is empty. Not the children are napping, empty, empty like a held breath. The caretakers stood in the middle of the floor and none of them were moving. One of them, an old female I had known since I was small myself, was holding a blanket, just holding it. She looked at me and her mouth moved and no words came out. I ran to my sister's unit. I did not knock. Her door was locked from the inside, so I broke it and I found her sitting on the floor by an empty crib and she was not crying, which was worse than crying, and she said, "Ossick, Atu was right here. I was in the next room. I heard him laugh, and then I didn't." That is the detail the archives leave out. So many of the parents heard their child laugh, or coo, or make one last happy sound, and then nothing. As if whatever took them in a moment of joy. We did not know it yet, but that was a clue. We would not understand it for a long time. By the end of the cold season, 31 systems had lost every child. Then 60. Then it stopped being a number anyone could hold in their head. Understand what this means for a galaxy. We are not humans. We do not breed the way you do, fast and easy and often. The V. Harnell female bears once, maybe twice in a long life. The Selith queens lay a single clutch a generation. The Mayan take 4 cycles of a moon just to conceive. Our children are rare. Our children are the whole reason for everything. and they were vanishing faster than we could count. The conquered did what governments do. It formed committees, it closed borders. It quarantined the affected worlds as if a locked door had ever stopped this thing. It blamed enemies. It blamed a rival cluster of species out past the rift, and there was almost a war over it, ships massing, until it turned out their children were vanishing too. Everyone's children. Nobody was safe. Nobody was the cause. That was the most frightening part. There was no one to fight. I was pulled from station duty and folded into the enforcement line. My job in those months was to keep order on worlds that were falling apart, because a people with no future stops behaving like a people. I saw riots. I saw whole cities of adults simply stop working, stop eating, sit down in the streets and wait to die because there was nothing to live for anymore. I saw a Drahel elder walk into a reactor because he could not bear the silence of his empty home. I pulled a Mayan mother off a ledge and she fought me the whole way, screaming that I had no right, that I did not understand. I did not have a child. She was correct. I did not understand, not yet. We were dying, not in one blow, slowly from the inside, the way a tree dies when its roots are cut. A galaxy of grieving adults with no reason to build anything ever again. And then, out on the far human frontier, a doctor noticed something. You have to remember, in those days the humans were nobody. Late arrivals. They had crawled out onto the galactic stage only a few centuries before, loud and clumsy and far too emotional, and most of the older species treated them like a joke. They bred fast, which we found vaguely disgusting. They slept a third of their lives away, which we found lazy. They could not hear the deep song of the void the way many of us could. They were, to our senses, half-deaf, blundering through a universe of signals they could not perceive. We did not think much of them. That was our first mistake. The doctor's name was Mara Okonkwo. I met her later. I will get to that. But the thing she noticed because humans are strange. Every other species lost their children instantly. One moment there, next moment gone. But on the human worlds it was different. It was slower. And the difference was this. Human children who were awake vanished. Human children who were asleep did not. It took her weeks to see the pattern because at first the human losses looked the same as everyone else's. Kids gone from playgrounds, from schoolyards, from the middle of a birthday celebration. But Dr. Okonkwo ran a children's ward on a colony called Harrow's Reach, and in her ward were the sick ones, the sedated ones, the ones deep under kept sleeping through their treatments. And none of them vanished. She checked it again and again, certain she was wrong. She stayed awake for days herself, watching the monitors. Every child who slipped from sleep into waking, even for a moment, even just surfacing toward consciousness, became a target. The instant a young mind lit up into full awareness, something reached for it. And the sleeping ones, the truly deep ones, were invisible. She sent the finding to the conquered science body. It was ignored. Of course it was. A half-deaf newcomer species, telling the ancient minds of the galaxy that the answer was sleep. Absurd. We had psionic elders who could hear the birth of stars. We had Selith queens who could feel a lie across a room. And a human wanted us to believe the great predator that was eating our future could be defeated by a nap. They laughed at her. I am ashamed to say I heard the joke passed around the barracks, and I laughed too. I need to tell you what the thing actually was, because we did not learn this until much later, and you deserve to understand what we were all up against. There was a sound in the deep, not sound, a call. A resonance that moved through the folds of space itself, older than any of our records, patient the way only truly ancient things are patient. It did not have a body we could shoot. It had a voice, and the voice was beautiful, and it only sang in a frequency that a young, waking, developing mind could hear. To a child, it sounded like the most wonderful thing in the universe, like everything they had ever wanted calling their name, like a game, like a parent's arms. That is why so many of the children laughed in their last moment. They were happy. They thought they were being invited somewhere marvelous. And when their little minds turned fully toward that call, reached back toward it with all the open, trusting brightness that only the very young possess, the call folded them out of the world. Wherever it kept them, we never found. But it needed them awake. It needed that bright reaching. A sleeping mind is dim and turned inward and full of nonsense, and it could not grip a sleeping mind any more than you can pick up water with your fingers. The humans, half-deaf, could not hear the call themselves, but their children could. And humans, because they are the way they are, because they had spent 100,000 years of their history singing their young to sleep in the dark, holding them, staying up all night when the little ones were frightened. Humans had a whole civilization's worth of knowledge about one specific thing: how to make a child sleep. We had forgotten. Most of our species did not sleep the way humans do. The Selith rested with half their minds awake. The Drahal entered a trance, not true sleep. The Mayan did not sleep at all, only slowed. We had no lullabies. We had no bedtime. We had no medicine gentle enough to put a frightened child under and keep it there safely for days, for weeks, for as long as it took. The humans had all of it, centuries of it. Because they loved their children in that particular clumsy, hands-on way, we had always found a little undignified. It turned out to be the only thing in the galaxy that could save us all. Dr. Okonkwo would not let it go. When the conquered ignored her, she went around them. She recorded a message. I have seen it. Everyone has seen it now. It is the most watched recording in galactic history, and she sent it to every world that would receive it in her own tired voice, with her ward beeping softly behind her. She was not eloquent. That is what got people. She did not sound like a scientist making a discovery. She sounded like an exhausted woman who had not slept in 4 days and had run out of ways to be polite. She said, I don't know what this thing is. I can't hear it and I can't fight it, but I know it can't take a sleeping child. I've watched it fail to take a sleeping child 200 times now. So here is what I'm asking. Put them under, all of them, every child you have left. I know you don't sleep like we do. I know it's frightening for you. We will teach you. We will send you our doctors, our medicine, our people who know how to do this. We will stay awake so your children can sleep safely. Just please, put them to sleep. Buy us time to find the source. Don't let it take one more. And then, because she was human and could not help herself, she started to cry right there on the recording, and she said, I've lost 40 in my own ward to the ones who woke up. 40. I can't do 41. Please. I remember watching it in the barracks. Nobody laughed that time. The conquered still hesitated. Ancient governments do not turn quickly, but the people did not hesitate. The people had buried their whole future, and here was a stranger offering them a shred of hope, and they took it with both hands. It became the largest thing our civilization has ever done, larger than any war, larger than the Great Migrations. Across 10,000 worlds, we began the impossible work of putting an entire generation to sleep and keeping them there. And the humans came. They came in every ship they had. Hospital ships, cargo haulers with cots welded into the holds, private vessels flown by retired pilots who had heard the call and could not stay home. They came with crates of sedatives and monitors, and I am not making this up, they came with soft toys. Millions of them. Because a human doctor named Okonkwo had said in a follow-up message that a frightened child sleeps better holding something soft, so put something in their arms. It doesn't matter what, just make sure it's soft. And every human who heard that emptied their homes of stuffed animals and sent them across the stars to be pressed into the paws and claws and tendrils of alien children they would never meet. I was assigned as escort to one of the first human medical teams to reach Vharnal space. That is how I came to be standing in a converted grain hall on my own homeworld, watching a species I had privately despised save my people's children. I watched Dr. Okonkwo's colleagues. She herself was still on Harrow's reach, running herself into the ground. I watched them work. I want to describe it to you exactly, because the archives will tell you they administered sedation protocols, and that is like describing a symphony as organized noise. They knelt, that is the first thing. Our medics stand, it is more dignified. The humans knelt down to the children's level. They made their loud faces soft. They lowered their voices. They took a screaming, terrified V. Harnell pup, a pup that had never been asleep in its life, because our young do not sleep. We had to teach them how, and they held it close against their own bodies, and they rocked it, and they sang. They did not know our songs. They sang their own. Human songs in human languages to V. Harnell children who could not understand a word. And it did not matter. It worked anyway. Because the thing a frightened child needs is not the meaning of the words. It is the warmth of the body and the steadiness of the voice and the certainty, communicated somehow beneath all language, that says, "You are safe, I have you, nothing will take you while I am holding you." I watched a young human man, barely more than a child himself, hold a Drahel larva against his chest for 11 hours straight because it would not settle any other way. And when his shift ended and someone came to relieve him, he would not hand it over. He said, "No, it knows my heartbeat now. If you take it, it'll wake. I've got it, I've got it." And he stayed. 11 more hours. His arms shaking, weeping quietly the whole time from exhaustion and refusing to put the child down. That was when it started to break in me, the thing I had believed about them. There was a cost to the humans that we did not see at first. To keep a galaxy of children asleep, someone has to stay awake. The children slept in shifts of days. The humans could not. There were never enough of them, so they simply did not sleep. They ran on their strange chemical drinks and their sheer refusal, tending millions of sleeping young across 10,000 worlds, and they burned themselves down to nothing doing it. I saw human medics collapse and be dragged to a cot, and be back on their feet in 3 hours, swaying, and go straight back to the children. I saw them make a game of it, laughing at how terrible they looked, and I understood slowly that the laughing was how they carried the weight. We V. Harnell endure in silence. The humans endure by joking with each other at 3 in the morning about which of them looked more like a corpse. It was the same strength wearing a different face. And they got attached. That was the thing none of us predicted. We thought they were doing a job. They were not doing a job. Every human in that grain hall fell hopelessly in love with the alien children they were keeping asleep. They named them, gave them little private nicknames the parents never heard. They memorized their faces. They learned which pup liked to be scratched behind the left ear, and which larva only settled if you hummed low, and they fought over shifts so they could stay with their children. I asked one of them why. A woman, middle-aged, with gray in her hair and a stain on her coat where a Selith hatchling had been sick on her. I asked her why they cared so much about children that were not theirs, not even their kind. She looked at me like I had asked why water is wet. "Because they're children," she said. "There isn't any other reason. That's the whole reason. They're children and they're scared and they're ours now. All of them. Every kid in this whole broken galaxy is ours now until this is over." I did not have an answer for that. I still do not. Now I have to tell you the hard part. The part the archives really get wrong, the part I was in. Not everyone believed in the sleep. There was a faction in the conquered, old, powerful, frightened in the way that the powerful get frightened, which is to say cruel. They looked at 10,000 worlds full of sleeping children and they did not see hope. They saw a vulnerability. They saw millions of young minds that the enemy wanted, all gathered in one place, all helpless, and they became convinced, the way frightened important people convince themselves of terrible things, that the sleeping children were bait, that the call was patient. That one day it would find a way through the sleep, and when it did, it would take all of them at once, and there would be nothing left. Their solution was the kind of thing that only makes sense in a locked room full of terrified people who have never held a child. They decided it would be better to end the sleeping children ourselves, cleanly, painlessly, on our own terms, deny the enemy its prize. Mercy, they called it, Better a quiet death than to be taken by the thing in the dark. I know how that sounds. I am not defending it. I am telling you it happened, and I am telling you that I was one of the soldiers ordered to do it, because I want you to understand that the line between a monster and a person is thinner than any of us like to believe, and that day I stood right on it. The order came down to my enforcement unit in the dead of the sleep season. A grain haul on V. Harnell, not the one I had escorted the humans to, another in the southern reach, had been designated. 2,000 children under, a skeleton crew of human medics tending them. Our orders were to secure the facility, remove the human staff, and administer cessation to the sleeping young. We were told the humans would resist, and that we were authorized to use force. I did not question it. I am ashamed of that more than anything else in my long life. I was a soldier, and it was an order, and I had spent my whole career not questioning orders, and I told myself the important people must know something I did not, and I loaded my rifle and I went. It was snowing when we reached the grain haul. V. Harnell's snow, fine and gray. The hall was an old converted thing, huge, its high windows glowing warm gold against the dark. Inside, 2,000 sleeping children and 11 human medics. 11 against a full enforcement squad. We came in through the main doors with our weapons up, shouting the way you are trained to shout to freeze people, to make them small and obedient. And the humans did not freeze. They stood up. They had been sitting among the cots, and they stood up, all 11 of them, and they put themselves between us and the sleeping children. Just stepped in front, unarmed. A row of exhausted humans in stained coats, standing between 2,000 sleeping alien young and a squad of armored soldiers with rifles. I remember their faces. That is the thing I cannot forget. They were not brave faces. Bravery has a kind of hardness to it. These were soft, frightened, terribly tired faces, and they were absolutely, completely immovable. A young man's hands were shaking so hard he had to press them against his legs, and he did not step aside. The one in the middle was Dr. Mara Okonkwo herself. She had come to V. Harnell. Of course she had. Wherever it was worst, that is where she was. She was smaller than I expected, gray at the temples. She looked like she had not slept in a month, because she had not. And she looked at the muzzle of my rifle, and then she looked past it at my eyes, and she spoke very quietly, so quietly that all the shouting in the room seemed to fold up and go silent around her voice. She said, "I know what your orders are. I know why. Someone up high got scared and decided dead is safer than taken. I understand the logic. I do." She took a breath. "But you're going to have to go through me. And I'm 61 years old and I've got a bad hip and I am not going to be hard to go through. So it's not really a fight. It's just a choice. Yours." My squad mates looked to me. I was the rank. It was mine to give the word. I looked at the row of humans, and behind them in the warm gold light the cots, 2,000 of them, and in the nearest cot, close enough that I could see it clearly, a V. Harnell pup asleep, one paw curled around a soft human toy, breathing slow and easy, safe, trusting, dreaming of whatever it is our young dream about. It looked like Adu. It was not Adu. My sister's pup was gone, taken in the first days before we knew. But it looked like him, same fat little body, same way of curling the paw, and I stood there with a rifle in my hands and an order in my ears, and I thought about my sister sitting on the floor by an empty crib saying I heard him laugh, and then I didn't. And I thought, the important people who gave this order have never sat on that floor. But the human in front of me had, 200 times over. She had lost 40 in her own ward and crossed the galaxy to save the rest, and now she was standing in front of my gun with a bad hip and no weapon, telling me it was just a choice. I lowered the rifle. I want to tell you it was a grand moment. It was not. My arms just lowered. Something in me that had been clenched my whole life simply let go. I heard my own voice, sounding strange to me, say, "Stand down." One of my squad mates, a hard young soldier named Vel, did not stand down. He kept his weapon up and he said the order was lawful and I was in violation. And he was right, technically I was. He said if I would not carry it out he would, and he took a step toward the humans, and the young man with the shaking hands made a small sound and did not move aside, and I understood that Vel was going to do it, was going to fire into that row of tired, unarmed people, and after them the children. So I put myself in front of him. I, a subwarden of the enforcement line, raised my own weapon against my own squad mate, in defense of 11 human strangers and 2,000 sleeping children, and I said, "You will not." It was very quiet, the snow ticking against the high windows, 2,000 children breathing, 11 humans not breathing at all. Vel looked at me for a long time. He was not a monster either. That is the thing I want you to understand. None of us were monsters. We were just frightened people holding weapons, which is the most dangerous thing in any universe. He looked at me, and he looked at the sleeping pup with the soft toy in its paw, and I watched the same thing move through him that had moved through me. He lowered his rifle. Then the next one did, then the whole squad. One by one in the gold light, a squad of soldiers sent to kill children, put down their guns. And Dr. Okonkwo, 61 years old with a bad hip, walked forward through the row of her people, and she did not thank me. She did not make it a big thing. She just reached up and put one small, warm hand flat against the armor over my chest, over where our hearts are, and she said, "Okay, okay, come on then. If you're not going to shoot them, you can help me keep them asleep. God knows I need the hands." And she turned around and went back to the children, and just like that I was one of them. I stayed in that grain hall for the rest of the sleep season. I who had come to end those children, spent 40 days keeping them alive. The humans taught me. They taught me how to hold a V-harnel pup so it would not wake, not too tight, they said. Tight makes them feel trapped. Just firm, just steady. Let them feel your heartbeat. They taught me to hum. I have a low voice and it turned out to be good for the Drahel larvae who like a deep sound. And I spent long nights with a larva curled in my palms, humming the only thing I knew, an old V-harnel marching tune, slowed down until it was almost gentle. I learned the children's faces. I learned which pup liked to be scratched behind the left ear. I fell into the same helpless love the humans had warned me about without warning me, because you cannot warn someone about that, you can only watch it happen. I understood, finally, what the woman with the gray hair had meant. They were children. That was the whole reason. There was no other reason, and no other reason was needed. And I learned what it cost the humans, because now I was paying it too. The sleeplessness, the shaking hands, the terror every time a child stirred toward waking, because waking meant the call could take it, and so the instant a little mind began to surface you had to be there. Right there, with your voice and your warmth, to pull it gently back down into safe, deep sleep before the thing in the dark could reach through. We lost some. I will not pretend we did not. In 40 days in that hall, we lost 9 children who woke in the night before anyone could reach them, who lit up bright for one instant and were gone between one breath and the next, an empty cot where a sleeping child had been. Each one broke us. I held Dr. Okonkwo while she wept over the 9th, and she said the same thing she had said in her very first message. She said, "I can't do one more." And then she wiped her face and went back to the others, because that is what she did, that is what all of them did. They could not do one more, and then they did one more anyway, again and again, forever. That is the thing about humans that I did not understand until I lived it. They are not strong the way we imagine strength. They break. They break constantly. They are the most easily broken people I have ever known. And then they keep going while broken, which it turns out is a completely different and far greater kind of strength, one we did not even have a word for. I should tell you how it ended, the call I mean. The thing in the dark. While a generation slept, the science bodies of 10,000 worlds worked on the one problem that mattered, finding the source. And it was the humans, again, who cracked it, because they were half deaf and so they had to build machines to hear what the call sounded like. and their machines heard it more clearly than any living mind ever had, because a machine does not get seduced. They traced it. It came from beyond the rift, from a dead region we had all avoided for 100 generations without ever quite remembering why. And when a joint fleet went out to it, V. Harnell and Seleth and Drahel and Mayan and Human together, the first time in history we had all sailed under one flag, they found the source. And I will not describe what it was, partly because the descriptions upset people, and partly because, honestly, I do not think anyone fully understood it. It was old. It was hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. And it had been singing to the young of the galaxy for longer than any of our species had existed, patiently drawing them in, one bright trusting mind at a time. They ended it. The details are in the archives if you want them. There was a cost there too. There is always a cost. Ships were lost. Good people did not come home, but the song stopped. And when the song stopped, they signaled back across the rift, one word, and the word went out to 10,000 worlds and 10,000 grain halls and 10,000 exhausted human medics, and one converted enforcement soldier standing in the gold light with a Drahel larva humming softly in his palms. Wake them. I will tell you about the waking, and then I will stop, because after the waking there is not much more that words can hold. We did not wake them all at once. It had to be gentle. The humans had a whole protocol for it, of course they did, they had thought of everything. Slowly, over hours, we let the sedation lift. And one by one, across the galaxy, the children of 100 species opened their eyes for the first time in a season and found the world still there. The pup that looked like Atu woke in my hands. I had held it through the last night. It opened its eyes and it did the thing our young do, the thing I had forgotten in all the fear. It yawned enormously and it looked at me with total unconcern, as if it had merely had a good nap, as if nothing had happened at all, as if the whole galaxy had not just held its breath for 40 days to keep it safe. It did not know. None of them knew. That was the mercy of it. To the children, they had simply slept, and now it was morning. The pup bit my thumb, hard. It had teeth again and it wanted to use them. And I, a hardened soldier, a sub-warden of the enforcement line who had come to that hall to kill, I sat down on the floor of the grain hall and I laughed, and I wept at the same time, which I had learned from the humans, who do both at once whenever something is too big for just one. All around me the hall was filling with the sound I had not heard since the 41st day of the cold season, the sound I had grown up in and never once thought about until it stopped. Small living noise, pups yipping, larvae clicking, hatchlings humming their contented hum, the most ordinary sound in the universe and the most precious, and every human in that hall had stopped working to just stand there and listen to it, faces wet, holding on to each other, listening to the galaxy's children wake up. Dr. Okonkwo sat down next to me on the floor. She was too tired to stand anymore. She watched the pup gnaw on my thumb and she smiled, and she looked older than the oldest thing I knew and younger, both at once. I asked her the question I had been carrying for 40 days. I asked her why they had done it. Not just her. All of them. Why a whole young clumsy species that we had laughed at, that we had thought was lazy and loud and unimportant, had emptied itself out across the stars, had gone without sleep and broken its own heart 1,000 times over, for the children of people who were not even their own kind. People who had, at the highest levels, sent soldiers to kill those very children out of fear. She thought about it for a while. The pup climbed off my lap and staggered over to her, and she caught it, easy, without thinking, the way a person catches a child 100,000 years of practice has taught their hands to catch. And she said, "You want to know the truth? We didn't do anything special. We just did the one thing we've always known how to do. Every other species out here can hear the stars sing. You've got powers we can't dream of, but somewhere along the way you forgot the small thing, the oldest thing, how to sit up in the dark with a scared kid and tell them it's going to be okay and stay there and mean it, no matter how tired you are until morning comes." She looked down at the pup, already falling back asleep in her arms, safe now, safe for real. That's all we did, she said. We stayed up. We stayed up with the whole galaxy's children, and we sang to them, and we waited for morning. That's the entire story. Everything else is just details. They tell this story wrong in the archives. Now you know why I had to tell it right. I am very old now, old even for a V. Harnell. The pup that bit my thumb has pups of its own, and I have held every one of them, and I have taught them all the human trick, the small oldest thing, how to sit up in the dark, how to sing, how to stay until morning. We remember it now, all of us. Every species in the Concord teaches its young how to sleep and how to help another sleep, and why. It is the first thing we teach before we teach anything else, before we teach the stars. Because we learned, in the cold season the children vanished, that all our great powers were worth nothing against the thing in the dark, and that the only weapon that ever mattered in the whole long history of everything was a tired stranger who would not put the child down. I keep a soft toy on the shelf by my bed, a human thing worn out, one eye missing. It belonged to a child I kept asleep in a grain hall on the 41st day of the cold season, 100 lifetimes ago now. I do not know what became of that particular child. I hope it grew old. I hope it had a good life and never once knew how close it came, and how far a broken-hearted, half-deaf, endlessly stubborn people came, across all the black between the stars, just to sit beside it in the dark. The galaxy fell silent when every cub vanished. And then the humans came, and knelt down and sang. And morning came.